Hi, Clint Coons here with Anderson Business Advisors, and in this segment, I'm going to cover what you should do with your personal residence. A lot of people ask that question. Where does my personal residence go, Clint? Does it go in an LLC? Does it go in a corporation? Does it just stay in my name? Or how about a land trust or a living trust? Well, the answer is it depends. Depends on what you're trying to do. Okay, one thing though is that it'll never go in a corporation. You'll never put your personal residence in a corporation. For most people, their personal residence will go in their living trust. But I can appreciate that some of you have a property that has a lot of equity in it. So then you're concerned that if somebody sued you individually, they could get after that equity. So you're looking for ways to hide the equity, to protect the property from a personal creditor. In those instances, we have to be creative. We have to think outside of the box and find other options for you. But keep in mind, if you live in a state that offers an unlimited homestead protection, such as Florida or Texas, then your home is always going to be placed in your living trust. You wouldn't want to move it anywhere else because it's already protected. So for most people initially, if you don't have a lot of equity in your house or you have an unlimited homestead protection in your state, your house will go into your living trust. Now, some people want anonymity on their property. So they'll ask, well, if I put it in my living trust has my name on it, that doesn't provide me any anonymity. How do I make sure that people don't know that I own it? I'm not really looking for asset protection, but I just want to make sure that people don't know I own this house. Well, in that case, what you could do is create a land trust. Again, you wouldn't do this in a state that has unlimited homestead protection. But in any other state, you're free to do this. You'd create a land trust to own that house, and you would have to use a nominee trustee. So again, you're going to be using me again, Clint, as trustee of the 428 Broadway Trust. Okay, that's what you would do. So that's where the title of the house would be held. Now, of course, I would resign my position and I would appoint you as a successor trustee at that point in time, so I'm no longer involved. But if somebody looked on title, what they're going to see is that this house is owned by a trust. You're no longer considered to be the owner of that property. So it provides a smokescreen. It does not provide asset protection because if they sued, since you're the beneficiary of the trust, they could take that property from you. So a land trust, as you recall, is set up to facilitate the transfer of real estate and to hide your ownership in real estate, but it doesn't offer asset protection. So this is just a smoke screen. Now, one last point on this strategy here. If you have a mortgage on your house, well, this will not make it completely anonymous. That is, your mortgage will still show up in your own name. So if somebody digs deep, they're going to see that you're the responsible party on this mortgage for this property, and they'll probably assume that I am not the owner. I have really nothing to do there. That was just their name only when we created the trust, and that you're still involved. So keep that in mind. Now, land trust into an LLC, into a living trust, that's one strategy. A second strategy, it's a little more aggressive, is to create a single member LLC, or what we refer to as a disregarded LLC. So you could do an LLC, and into the LLC, you could put your property directly, or you could use a land trust to get it in there, but this would be a way to structure it, and then that LLC is owned by your living trust. So this is option 2. Now, with option number 2, there's some drawbacks there. Number 1, the LLC is a business entity. So if you put a personal residence into a business entity, you're actually defeating the intent of creating that company, which is to run it as a business, because you're going to live there for free. So if it was challenged, could a creditor dismantle that LLC and get to your property? Most likely, yes. Or there's a strong likelihood that they could. But at the same time, does a creditor want to go through that process to try to break that LLC to get to the property? Probably not. You don't see this very often. Unless it's a very aggressive creditor and you owe them a lot of money, they typically are not going to go to the hassle of trying to break through a limited liability company to get after the assets that are held therein. So you can use this in certain circumstances to own property. Now, you wouldn't just go transfer it into the LLC. If it has a mortgage, you have to use that land trust if there's a mortgage on it. But if it's paid off, definitely you could put it in there. That would be option 2. Option 3 is to get a Heloc, a home equity line of credit. Okay, so you'd get a Heloc on your property. You go down to the bank and say, I'd like to take out an equity line of credit against my property. They would then give you X amount of money. They would tell you you could borrow it any time, secured by your personal residence. This is a great strategy because it makes it appear as if you use the money, when in reality, you haven't. You don't use the money until you actually borrow it, but the bank needs security because they agree to loan you that money at any time. So the Heloc is a great strategy because if you gave this property as collateral to a bank right here, and somebody was coming after you and you thought that your home might be at risk, what I would do is draw down as much money I can from that bank and put that cash in my Wyoming LLC to lock down that equity. That is, that equity is now owed to the bank because I took all the money that I could out of the equity in my property through that loan. So Heloc's a great strategy. So that would be number 3. Number 4, well, it's using this Wyoming LLC. With the Wyoming LLC, you can actually do the same thing as this, but take the bank out of the mix. You become your own bank. So rather than using a bank, you're using your Wyoming LLC to file the deed of trust against the property. So here you enter into a private Heloc with your Wyoming LLC. The reason why this is an effective smokescreen is because with the Wyoming LLC, nobody knows that you own it because you're using a nominee. So if somebody were to look on title, they see your house, they see that it's encumbered by a first, let's say with Bank of America, and then it has a second with this entity down in Wyoming, XYZ Limited Liability Company. Well, someone would then assume that you borrowed money from this company and you secured your house with that loan. So when looking at your house, they would see that there's no equity there. The thing about no equity is that there's nothing to get, so you become less of a target. So you really have 4 different options for your house. Most individuals, we're going to start with putting their house directly into the living trust because this was set up for your estate planning purposes. If you want some anonymity, go with the land trust. Takes your name off title. If you want some asset protection, set up an LLC, put that land trust into the LLC. Now we've locked in some asset protection. Not perfect, but it's there. If you want to give yourself the ability to strip the equity at any time, make it appear like it's not worth anything, get a traditional Heloc on your property with a lender. Now, if you don't want to do that because you don't want it to hit your credit score, or maybe they just won't lend to you, then look at option number 4. Use that Wyoming LLC we created for you as your own private bank to put your own private Heloc on your residence to make the equity disappear. And by the way, don't worry about the fact of whether or not you have the money in that LLC to substantiate the purported loan. That is, if you have $400,000 equity in this house and you enter into a $400,000 line of credit Heloc agreement with your Wyoming LLC, you don't have to have $400,000 in the LLC. This is a smokescreen, all right? That's all it is. $40,000 would be sufficient. $10,000 would be sufficient. I mean, if the creditor pushed and they went after that house, you're only secured to the amount of money you loaned. So they would still have access to it. So that's why I call it a smokescreen. Well, these are 4 different ways to protect your residence. So when you're thinking about your property and what you want to do with it, you have these 4 options. My name's Clint Coons with Anderson Business Advisors, and in this segment we discuss what to do with your personal residence.